Well, glad to have you all here. Well, let's jump right into it. We're going to start with the presidential race. It's getting tighter and tighter by the day, but we're going to first go to you, Steve, and talk about Florida's always considered a purple state now. It always hasn't been that way, but now it is. So from your perspective, and we think about Hillary's ground game that we hear so much about, and Trump using only social media. What's your take on that, and where do we see Florida going because of what they're doing or not doing?
It looks like Hillary Clinton's in a better position at the moment because she has a lot of campaign offices open. Donald Trump does not. But as viewers are well aware, both these candidates have immense political liabilities. And so how that's going to translate into a difficulty in getting some of people who should be supporting each of these candidates to get out to vote. We recently saw Donald Trump in Pensacola. He's going to need a huge turnout in North Florida to really be competitive in this race. By the same token, Hillary Clinton needs to get out the vote in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. About 1 of every 3 Democrats in Florida lives in those 3 counties. And turnout's always higher in presidential years in Florida, but we also have the abundant evidence that those voters are among the hardest to motivate to get to the polls.
Right, right. Well, okay, so as things are tightening up, Marilyn, we're going to go to you. How does Hillary carry a message better than Donald Trump in this election as we see it in Florida?
Well, I think what makes Florida really interesting this election cycle is the growing influence of the Latin voter, Hispanic voter, and Hillary definitely over the charts, off the top, has an advantage there. Now, this is where the ground game and where the voter turnout, as Steve mentioned, makes a difference. There's a lot of voters that are Hispanic voters that are many of them Puerto Rican. They're automatically registered. They're automatic citizens. They're registered to vote. The question is, many of them are still confused about where Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton actually are on some of the issues like DACA and the other, issues that are important to them. So I think that it really is likely to come down to voter issues in Florida.
So you think beyond just the standard personalities that we're seeing, you think those voters in Florida are really going to be issue immigration centric?
Yeah, and I think it's because the Hispanic voters in Florida are energized in a way that we have never seen them, and it's because of Donald Trump's perception that he is so anti-immigrant, anti-reform, but it's a matter of what will she do for us, and is it enough to get them to vote?
Right. Well, back to personalities, and Jim, this one's coming to you. So when we think about personalities in this election, certainly we've seen Hillary up her game. We've seen Donald. I mean, he walked into this race as a personality. How much do you think that's going to resonate on the airwaves or to the voter?
I think the great wild card in my mind, at least, is that Donald Trump's been breaking all the rules for the past year and a half. And he keeps winning, and he keeps doing well. So, I mean, all the issues about field offices and issues and everything, I'm not sure in the end how all that's going to play out, because he has built a campaign around his personality. Now, some hate him, some love him, but it is a personality-driven campaign that he is running. So, I mean, as Steve alluded to this appearance recently in Pensacola, he had 12,000 people there or something. I mean, it was a huge crowd. He's able to draw those crowds. And, Hillary has, she does have the ground game. She has the sort of traditional campaign structure, but she also has some personal liabilities. So I think there's a lot of issues that are hard to measure at this point. And whether people are going to get energized by Hillary Clinton's campaign to turn out to vote for her. I agree with Mary Ellen, that Hispanic population is crucial to watch. But will they get energized to turn out for her?
Right.
So I think the personalities are critical in this campaign. And in some ways, they, in my mind at least, almost override some of the blocking and tackling of the campaign.
Right. Well, when you look at that party platform argument and that traditional platform that we think about, how does that get to those voters? We've got this big 3 million plus voter block that's just not there yet. And it's called the Independents. And they're no party affiliate, and they're one of the fastest growing blocks in Florida. John, how do you think the Independents are going to receive either the messages, the personalities, the party platform? They're so hard to gauge. Where do you think they are?
I mean, they're a complete toss-up and an unknown going in at this point. But you're seeing some evidence maybe that may be good for Republicans, I would say, in that some polls have shown Marco Rubio is on the ballot running for re-election as a Republican U.S. Senator. He is doing very well with independents. In this election, this may be a weird election where you have a situation where typically the presidential race affects the Senate race. In this state, it is possible that maybe the Senate race affects that presidential race, where if Republicans turn out for Marco Rubio, well, they also, oh, what the heck? I'm not crazy about Trump, but I'll vote for him. Right. It could be that kind of race.
Well, let's stay on that. Now let's shift from the presidential election to that Senate race. So Marco Rubio, Senator Rubio has just made it through a rough primary, as well as Congressman Murphy, but Rubio seems to have opened up a big lead. Why do you think that is?
Well, he's known, a known figure. He did not run well as a presidential candidate in this state. He was clobbered by Trump. But I think there's still sort of a residue of people are familiar with him. He's running against Patrick Murphy, who is unknown statewide. So that is clearly an advantage for Rubio. And Rubio has tried to navigate very carefully, his policies and kind of keeping a little bit of a distance from some of the more, alarming things that Trump has said. So maybe that all helps.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about Congressman Murphy. So this one's a dealer's choice. So you guys can pick who wants to take this one. Who is Congressman Murphy? To the voter out there that may not dive as deep as y'all do, who is Congressman Murphy and what's he all about?
Young, good-looking, untested, inexperienced, good name. It's a good name. It's a good ethnic sounding, Irish sounding name, Patrick Murphy.
For all those Irish people in Florida.
He's from a good part of the state. That is, he's from Palm Beach County.
Right.
So he's at the northern tier of that area we spoke about. But 33 years old. He'd be I believe he'd be the youngest member of the United States Senate if he won. The Democrats have a fighting chance to win Senate seats in 3 other states that are a lot less expensive to buy ads in than Florida. This is the problem Murphy's going to have. Right. If Murphy continues to be behind Rubio in the polls, the Democrats are going to look at limited resources and realize they've got a shot to win back a Senate seat in Indiana, New Hampshire, and in Pennsylvania, big state, but still not as expensive as Florida. So.
Well, when you think about that Senate race and you think about how big it is, we've got one candidate in there that ran for president. Now, what's Senator Rubio's hangover effect, if you will, from running and not ultimately becoming the nominee? Jim?
Well, I look at it a little differently. I think his entrance into this race, totally blew up the calculations that everybody was making about this race. The Democrats, they had Murphy, as Steve alluded to, is not that well known. But if he were running against the previous Republican field before Rubio got in, they were all unknown too. And it was a much more even field. But Rubio, he came out of the presidential race with some liabilities. The Democrats are hitting him for some of the statements he had said, well, I'm not going to run for Senate. I can better spend my time on the campaign trail than in the Senate. Those sorts of things. They're hitting him on those things. But he has so much name ID, and he's an experienced politician, that just his presence in the race, I think, just sucked a lot of oxygen out of both sides of it. And, Murphy has the support of the White House. He has support of all the Democratic establishment. But he had that before Rubio made his decision. So I'm just not sure that it's real easy to overcome that name ID and the presence that Rubio has in the state.
There is an enthusiasm gap among some Republicans, and that, I think, is the hangover effect. It is that those that really are not happy with what Rubio did on immigration reform, those to the right of center, the Tea Party groups that really want us, that are holding it against him. And I think that's possibly why he did so poorly against Trump around Florida in the Republican primary. So I think that could hurt him if there's not that enthusiasm factor. The other niche, and I hate to keep hearkening back to this, but I think it's a crucial piece in Florida, and that is the Hispanic vote. Among Hispanics in Florida, he is tied with Murphy, even though they hardly know Murphy and they don't really know where Murphy is. But he is so Hispanics, who you'd think now that the older classic Cuban voters in Miami-Dade are supportive of Rubio, and that's the only county he won against Trump. But the other parts of the state, especially the I-4 corridor, which will make the difference where there's Puerto Rican influence, it's very clear that Rubio is not a favorite there among those Hispanic voters.
We were talking a moment ago about the enthusiasm gap, and I think that is something that the Democrats are facing right now. They may not like to acknowledge it, but I think we saw glimmers of it in the primary in August as far as turnout went. Republicans had a lot more turnout. Rubio, in a arguably less competitive primary race, outperformed Patrick Murphy when it came to voter turnout. And I think you also saw during that election down in South Florida, which is the bedrock of Democratic voters, lower than state average voter turnout. I think those are all bad signs for the Democrats. I think that says that Democrats are not enthusiastic about this election year.
Well, then the next question that a lot of folks will ask is about coattails, right? We always think, well, will Murphy ride Secretary Clinton's coattails? But with that waning effect, how much will coattails come into play? Mary Ellen, you want to take that?
Well, I do think that's a really good question. I think this is an aberration year. I think it's the only coattails we may see, as John mentioned, is the opposite effect, where Rubio helps Trump. And the odds, I think, of Hillary hurting people down ticket may be actually greater. So
well, and I think going to that point, one of the things the Republicans have been good at over the years is they may have their differences, but in the end, they become pretty unified. And one of the messages we hear out of Washington, and we're hearing at the state level, I think we're going to hear a lot of over the next couple of months, is got to retain control of the U.S. Senate. And if you pound that message home enough to Republicans, I think a lot of them will vote for Rubio, even if they don't like him or have been turned off by him. But they know that holding on to that U.S. Senate is crucial, particularly because they don't know who's going to, if Trump can win the presidential race.
All right, well, thanks, guys. I think we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.